Hey everyone, welcome back to Buried Truth Project. Today we're diving into one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history, the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. The powerful union boss who vanished without a trace in 1975, sparking decades of investigations, conspiracy theories, and searches that have turned up nothing. But the full story of who Jimmy Hoffa was, why he disappeared, and what likely happened to him is far more complex and disturbing than you ever imagined. Before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. All right, let's jump in. Let's start with who Jimmy Hoffa really was, because understanding the man is essential to understanding why he disappeared. James Riddle Hoffa was born in 1913 in Brazil, Indiana. He grew up poor during the Great Depression and started working at age 14 to help support his family after his father died. In 1932, at age 19, Hoffa got a job loading and unloading freight cars for a grocery chain in Detroit. The work was brutal, the pay was terrible, and workers had no rights or protection. Hoffa organized his first labor strike right there in the warehouse. He and his co-workers refused to unload a shipment of strawberries in the summer heat until the company agreed to better wages and working conditions. The strawberries started rotting, and the company gave in. Hoffa had discovered his power and his calling. By 1957, Jimmy Hoffa had become the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, one of the largest and most powerful labor unions in America. At its peak under Hoffa's leadership, the Teamsters had 2.3 million members. Hoffa negotiated contracts that gave truck drivers, warehouse workers, and delivery personnel better wages, health benefits, and pensions. To working-class Americans, Jimmy Hoffa was a hero. But here's what most people don't know. Hoffa built his power through alliances with the Mafia. To control the union and win labor disputes, Hoffa made deals with organized crime families across the country. The mob helped him intimidate opponents, rig union elections, and break strikes at competing companies. In return, Hoffa gave the Mafia access to the Teamsters' enormous pension fund, hundreds of millions of dollars that could be loaned out for construction projects, casinos, and other ventures with no questions asked. This wasn't a small-time operation. The Teamsters Pension Fund essentially became the Mafia's bank. Hoffa approved loans to build casinos in Las Vegas, finance construction projects, and fund organized crime operations across America. The money flowed both ways. Hoffa became wealthy, and the mob became even more powerful. But this arrangement caught the attention of one man who would become Hoffa's nemesis, Robert F. Kennedy. In the late 1950s, Robert Kennedy was chief counsel for the Senate Rackets Committee investigating union corruption. He became obsessed with taking down Jimmy Hoffa. Kennedy believed Hoffa was a criminal hiding behind the facade of a labor leader, using union members' money to enrich himself and empower organized crime. The two men hated each other. Hoffa called Kennedy a spoiled brat who'd never worked a real job. Kennedy called Hoffa a thug and a crook. Their confrontations during Senate hearings became legendary. Hoffa would smirk and give evasive answers, while Kennedy grilled him with barely contained rage. When John F. Kennedy became president in 1961, he appointed his brother Robert as Attorney General. Bobby Kennedy made destroying Jimmy Hoffa his personal mission. He created a special unit within the Justice Department called the Get Hoffa Squad, literally dedicated to finding evidence to prosecute Hoffa. After years of investigation, the government finally got him. In 1964, Hoffa was convicted of jury tampering and fraud. In 1967, he began serving a 13-year prison sentence at Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. But here's what's remarkable. Even from prison, Hoffa continued to run the Teamsters Union. He communicated through his lawyers, issued orders, and maintained control. The Teamsters remained loyal to him, and Hoffa remained defiant. Then in 1971, something changed. President Richard Nixon commuted Hoffa's sentence on the condition that Hoffa step down from union leadership and not participate in union activities until 1980. Hoffa was released from prison but effectively banned from the thing he loved most, running the Teamsters. This is where the story gets really interesting, because Hoffa couldn't stay away. He was convinced his successor, Frank Fitzsimmons, was weak and was letting the mob take too much control of the union. Hoffa started working behind the scenes to overturn the restrictions on his union involvement. He wanted his power back. The Mafia didn't want that. Under Fitzsimmons, they had free access to the pension fund without Hoffa's oversight. Hoffa had become a problem, a liability who knew too much and wanted to disrupt their profitable arrangement. Now let's talk about July 30th, 1975, the day Jimmy Hoffa disappeared. Hoffa was living in Lake Orion, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit. On that Wednesday afternoon, he told his wife Josephine he was meeting with two men, Anthony Tony Jack Giacalone, a Detroit Mafia captain, and Anthony Tony Pro Provenzano, a Teamsters official from New Jersey with strong mob connections. The meeting was supposedly to resolve differences between Hoffa and Provenzano. Hoffa drove to the Machu's Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township, Michigan, a well-known meeting spot for business lunches. He arrived around 2 p.m. According to witnesses, Hoffa waited in the parking lot for about 30 minutes. He made a phone call to his wife around 2:30 p.m., complaining that he'd been stood up. He sounded annoyed but not alarmed. That was the last confirmed contact anyone had with Jimmy Hoffa. By evening, when Hoffa hadn't returned home, his family called the police. Hoffa's car was found in the restaurant parking lot, unlocked with no signs of a struggle. But Jimmy Hoffa was gone. The investigation began immediately, and it quickly became clear this wasn't a simple missing person case. The FBI suspected Hoffa had been murdered by the Mafia to prevent him from regaining control of the Teamsters Union. But here's what made the case so frustrating. Both Tony Giacalone and Tony Provenzano had airtight alibis. Giacalone was at a nearby athletic club, seen by multiple witnesses. Provenzano was in New Jersey, playing cards at a union hall with dozens of witnesses. Neither man could have been at the Red Fox restaurant when Hoffa disappeared.
So what really happened to Jimmy Hoffa? Over the decades, the FBI has investigated dozens of theories, dug up numerous locations, and interviewed hundreds of witnesses. And while we may never have absolute proof, investigators now believe they know what happened. The most credible theory, supported by FBI investigators and Mafia informants, goes like this. Hoffa was lured to the restaurant under the pretense of a peace meeting, but Giacalone and Provenzano never intended to show up. Instead, they sent trusted associates to pick up Hoffa. According to this theory, a man named Chucky O'Brien, who was like a son to Hoffa, picked him up in a car. Hoffa trusted O'Brien completely, so he got in without suspicion. In the car were other men, likely including Salvatore Sally Bugs Bergoglio, a hitman connected to the Provenzano crew. The car drove to a house about 20 minutes away. There, Hoffa was killed, most likely shot in the head. His body was then taken to a mob-connected location, possibly a funeral home or waste disposal facility, where it was destroyed. Some theories suggest he was cremated. Others suggest his body was put through an industrial meat grinder or buried in concrete. The most famous theory is that Hoffa's body was buried under the end zone of Giants Stadium in New Jersey, which was under construction at the time. This theory became so popular it was referenced in movies and TV shows. But when investigators finally got permission to search the stadium in 2010, they found nothing. Here's what makes the Hoffa case so frustrating. Investigators know who likely killed him. They know approximately where it happened, but they've never been able to prove it or find the body. Over the years, multiple Mafia informants have claimed to know what happened to Hoffa. In 2004, a former Teamsters official named Frank Sheeran, on his deathbed, confessed to killing Hoffa. He claimed he shot Hoffa twice in the head in a house in Detroit. His story became the basis for the movie The Irishman, directed by Martin Scorsese. But here's the problem. Investigators found significant inconsistencies in Sheeran's story. Forensic evidence at the house he identified didn't match his account. Some FBI agents believe Sheeran made up the confession to gain notoriety before he died. In 2021, the FBI conducted a search at a former landfill site in New Jersey based on a tip from another informant. They brought in ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs. After weeks of searching, they found nothing. The reality is that whoever killed Jimmy Hoffa did an incredibly thorough job of disposing of the body. In the nearly 50 years since his disappearance, despite massive investigations, advanced forensic technology, and numerous searches, not a single piece of physical evidence has ever been found. Let's talk about why Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance matters beyond just being an unsolved mystery. Hoffa's case exposed the deep corruption at the intersection of labor unions, organized crime, and American politics. The Teamsters Union was supposed to protect workers, but under Hoffa's leadership, it became a tool for organized crime. The pension fund that was meant to provide retirement security for truck drivers was being loaned to mobsters to build casinos and finance criminal enterprises. Hoffa's disappearance also marked a turning point in how law enforcement approached organized crime. The FBI had been relatively hands-off with the Mafia, viewing them as local law enforcement problems. But Hoffa's case demonstrated how organized crime had infiltrated major American institutions. This eventually led to the aggressive RICO prosecutions of the 1980s and 1990s that dismantled many Mafia families. Here's something most people don't know. In 1982, 7 years after his disappearance, Jimmy Hoffa was legally declared dead. His wife Josephine received his death benefits from the Teamsters, but she never believed the official theories about what happened. Until her death in 1980, she maintained that Jimmy was still alive somewhere, unable to come home. Hoffa's son, James P. Hoffa, followed in his father's footsteps and became president of the Teamsters Union from 1999 to 2022. He spent decades trying to find out what happened to his father, pushing for new investigations and following up on every lead. But even with his resources and connections, he never found answers. The Hoffa case has become part of American mythology. There are jokes about swimming with Hoffa instead of sleeping with the fishes. Construction sites across America have had rumors that Hoffa's body is buried in the foundation. Every few years, someone comes forward with a new theory or a new location to search. But here's what we should remember. Behind the jokes and the movies and the conspiracy theories, Jimmy Hoffa was a real person. He had a wife who loved him, children who missed him, and grandchildren who never got to know him. His disappearance caused real pain and left real questions unanswered. The Hoffa case also represents something larger, the violence and corruption at the heart of organized crime. The Mafia didn't just run illegal gambling and loan sharking operations. They infiltrated legitimate businesses, corrupted unions that were supposed to protect workers, and murdered anyone who became inconvenient. Hoffa was one of their own, someone they'd worked with for decades, and they killed him without hesitation when he threatened their interests. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Jimmy Hoffa probably got exactly what he deserved. He spent decades making deals with murderers and criminals. He used violence and intimidation to maintain power. He stole from the union members who trusted him. When the mob decided he was a liability, they used the same methods on him that he'd used on others. But that doesn't mean justice was served. Hoffa's killers were never prosecuted. They went on with their lives, probably killing other people, probably continuing their criminal activities. The lack of a body meant no murder charges could be filed with certainty. The people responsible literally got away with murder. In 2019, the FBI officially closed its active investigation into Hoffa's disappearance, though they said they would follow up on any credible new leads. After 44 years, hundreds of interviews, dozens of searches, and millions of dollars spent, they admitted they might never solve the case. So what's the truth about what happened to Jimmy Hoffa? The most likely scenario is this. He was murdered on July 30th, 1975, by Mafia hitmen connected to the Teamsters and organized crime families he'd worked with for years. His body was destroyed so thoroughly that it will probably never be found. The men who ordered his death and carried it out are all dead now, taking the exact details to their graves. Jimmy Hoffa's legacy is complicated. To some, he was a champion of working people who fought to give truck drivers and warehouse workers dignity and fair wages. To others, he was a corrupt union boss who enriched himself and empowered organized crime. The truth is probably both. What's certain is that his disappearance remains one of America's most enduring mysteries, a symbol of the violence and corruption of the Mafia era, and a reminder that powerful men can vanish without a trace when they become inconvenient to people more powerful than themselves. So there you have it, the real story of Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance. From his rise as a union leader to his alliances with the mob, from his battle with Bobby Kennedy to his final day at the Red Fox restaurant. This case reveals the dark underbelly of American labor, politics, and organized crime. What do you think happened to Jimmy Hoffa? Let me know in the comments. And here's a question for you. Will we ever find his body? Or are some mysteries meant to remain unsolved forever? If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's greatest mysteries, smash that like button and subscribe to Buried Truth Project for more untold stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, the truth is always deeper than the surface. I'll see you in the next one.